Piastri speaks and Formula One stops. Ferrari's future rewritten. McLaren's harmony shattered. And before Austin, the paddock can barely breathe. 4 months, McLaren's garage has been a theater of contradictions, a team winning races yet fighting shadows. On the surface, everything looks calm, smiles in press conferences, technical confidence, unity between drivers. But inside, the atmosphere has changed. The quiet trust that once defined McLaren's driver pairing is gone, replaced by something colder. Every strategy call, every pit stop, every split-second decision now carries suspicion. And at the heart of that unease stands Oscar Piastri, calm, articulate, precise yet quietly distant from the team that once hailed him as its future. The tension didn't begin overnight. Insiders trace it back to early summer, when McLaren's internal strategy began consistently leaning toward Lando Norris. It started subtly, a pit priority here, a tire call there. Nothing that broke rules, but enough to leave a mark. At first, Piastri brushed it off. He's not emotional by nature, and he understands the politics of team racing. But as the season unfolded, those small decisions became patterns. In Hungary, he was undercut after leading. In Monza, his pace was sacrificed for an alternate tire strategy that benefited Norris. And then came Singapore, the breaking point. A mistake from Norris into turn 1 forced Piastri offline, costing him a potential podium. Over the radio, his tone said everything. It wasn't anger. It was disbelief. Since that race, something has shifted. Piastri hasn't lashed out publicly, but his detachment has been impossible to ignore. Mechanics describe him as clinical, engineers call him methodical to a fault. But underneath that professionalism is frustration. He's kept every commitment, completed every debrief, smiled through every interview, yet those who know him well see the signs. He's stopped using words like "we." It's now the car and the team. For a driver as cerebral as Piastri, language matters. And when he starts to separate himself linguistically from the organization, it's because emotionally, he already has. Inside McLaren, the leadership knows what's happening, even if they refuse to say it aloud. Andrea Stella, who has built his reputation on transparency and emotional intelligence, has tried to mediate privately. But even he can sense the imbalance. Norris has become the emotional core of the team the driver McLaren builds around, while Piastri, despite his equal pace and cleaner consistency, has been treated like the support act. To the outside world, it's strategy. To Piastri, it's hierarchy. And that's something he never signed up for. Behind the scenes, conversations have turned serious. Piastri's management, led by Mark Webber, has been quietly monitoring how the team operates, from decision-making chains to internal communication. They've noticed the patterns too. And in the world of Formula One, when a driver's team loses his confidence, the consequences are always the same: movement. He's not angry, one close source said. He's calculating. He knows exactly how these things work. If the trust is gone, he'll move before the damage becomes permanent. That calculation, cold and professional, is what makes Piastri dangerous and desirable. Inside Ferrari's headquarters at Maranello, the atmosphere feels strangely split, half exhaustion, half anticipation. The scars from a turbulent season are still visible, but beneath the fatigue there's a quiet rhythm returning. The wind tunnel hums through the night. The simulators run endless loops of new geometry data. Engineers who once argued over the SF25's flaws are now focused on a single target: the future. Not next month, not even next year, but the 2026 regulation reset that will redefine everything. And that's where Oscar Piastri enters the story, not as gossip, but as strategy. Fred Vasseur has made it clear that Ferrari's next generation of machinery will not repeat the sins of the past. The days of over-engineered perfection and political paralysis are over. He wants adaptability, simplicity, and drivers capable of maximizing feedback through precision rather than instinct. Ferrari's new car, still codenamed Project 677, internally is being designed around stability, not spectacle. The team's aerodynamic philosophy has shifted toward a flatter rake concept and a neutral rear-end balance that demands extraordinary control. It's a car that rewards methodical precision, corner discipline, and minimal energy loss on throttle transition. And if there's one modern driver who embodies those qualities, it's Oscar Piastri. Ferrari's performance engineers have followed Piastri closely since his Formula 2 title year, fascinated by how his data traces show almost robotic consistency. His throttle application, for instance, is smoother than nearly any other driver on the grid, a perfect match for Ferrari's sensitivity-prone power delivery. His steering inputs are micro-adjusted, favoring predictability over aggression, which mirrors exactly the kind of driver profile Ferrari has been trying to find since Kimi Räikkönen retired. Even Charles Leclerc, though blisteringly fast, tends to rely on instinctive overdrive, something that often destabilizes Ferrari's delicate aero platforms. Piastri, by contrast, treats the car like a technical instrument. That's what excites Maranello's engineers most. He doesn't fight physics. He works with it. Behind the scenes, Ferrari's simulation department has already begun integrating external driver telemetry profiles into their next-generation models. According to sources familiar with the process, anonymized performance data resembling Piastri's driving patterns have been studied since August. Officially, it's part of Ferrari's cross-driver comparison program. Unofficially, it's preparation. The engineers are testing how their next car concept responds to a Piastri-like driver, how his smoother inputs could stabilize airflow, how his throttle modulation could reduce tire temperature spikes, how his corner entry precision could offset the car's weight distribution challenges. It's not recruitment. It's rehearsal. Meanwhile, inside the paddock, McLaren's engineers are noticing something equally unsettling. Ferrari's interest feels familiar. It's the same kind of quiet observation Mercedes once showed before signing George Russell, the same pattern of interest that precedes a generational handover. They know how Ferrari operates: slow, silent, and absolute. Once Maranello sets its eyes on someone, the conversation isn't if, it's when. And as Vasseur builds his post-Hamilton era, the timing lines up perfectly. Hamilton's arrival was about experience, Piastri's would be about evolution. There's also the technical synergy between Piastri's driving philosophy and Ferrari's new approach to car development. Under the 2026 regulations, cars will run with reduced aerodynamic drag and a larger dependency on energy recovery systems, a landscape where smooth, predictive drivers will thrive. Ferrari's future car will need precision more than aggression, patience more than instinct. It will be a car that rewards rhythm, not reaction. Piastri fits that DNA effortlessly. That's why Ferrari's technical department talks about him not as a risk, but as inevitability. He's not just fast, said one engineer, speaking anonymously. He drives like a computer that understands emotion. That's rare. That's what wins titles in the next era. And beyond the data, there's a philosophical connection. Ferrari doesn't just want speed, it wants rebirth. It wants to rebuild its image around drivers who reflect control, intelligence, and modernity. Piastri represents all of that. His rise through junior categories, his discipline, his calm defiance, they feel like the antidote to Ferrari's chaos. He's not the kind of driver who shouts on the radio or blames the team mid-race. He's the one who says nothing, studies everything, and finds 2/10 through silence. That is precisely the mentality Ferrari has been missing. The Formula One paddock thrives on noise: mechanical, emotional, political. But this time, the noise didn't come from engines. It came from one sentence, spoken softly and deliberately, by Oscar Piastri. Every driver dreams of Ferrari. Maybe the dream will come sooner than you think. Within hours, that line had detonated across the sport like shrapnel. It wasn't shouted. It didn't need to be. It was surgical. And in Formula One, subtlety cuts deeper than outrage. McLaren's response came fast, too fast. The team released a carefully worded statement, insisting that Piastri remains fully committed to the McLaren project. But anyone who's spent a decade in this sport knows how to read between the lines. Remains fully committed is what teams say when they're unsure. It's a sentence built for control, not conviction. Inside McLaren's Woking headquarters, that uncertainty was spreading. Piastri had just handed Ferrari a psychological advantage, and worse, he'd done it without ever breaking a contract. Behind the cameras, Andrea Stella was livid. Calm in public, furious in private. To him, this wasn't just a rumor, it was betrayal dressed as diplomacy. He called Piastri and Mark Webber into a private meeting immediately after the press quotes began circulating. The conversation was short, professional, but tense. "We are a team, not a stepping stone," Stella told them. Piastri's answer was as cool as his driving, "Then treat me like one." Webber said nothing. He didn't have to. Everyone in that room knew what the silence meant. McLaren had lost control of the narrative, and Webber, a man who's played this game before, had just regained it. Over in Maranello, the mood was entirely different. Ferrari didn't need to say a word, the world was already doing it for them. Vasseur was asked directly about the rumors during an Italian radio interview. His reply was classic Ferrari theater: "We are always flattered when great drivers speak of Ferrari with respect. No denial. No outrage. Just poise." The kind of response that keeps journalists guessing and fans believing. Inside the paddock, everyone recognized the move. Ferrari had mastered the art of saying nothing while letting the silence roar. And as the days ticked closer to Austin, the speculation became unstoppable. The dynamic between Hamilton and Leclerc added another layer of intrigue. Both men were asked about the Piastri talk, and both gave answers that sounded eerily rehearsed. Hamilton, diplomatic as ever, said, "He's a great talent, Ferrari deserves the best." Leclerc, visibly colder, replied, "I don't decide who joins. I just drive." The contrast spoke volumes. Hamilton's composure suggested he already knew what was coming. Leclerc's stiffness hinted that he didn't like it. If Piastri truly joins Ferrari, it could be as Leclerc's replacement, not his teammate. And that possibility has turned the Italian media into a frenzy. For McLaren, the problem isn't just losing a driver, it's losing control. In Formula One, image is power, and right now, Ferrari is dictating the story. Every headline about Piastri's dream puts pressure on Woking, not Maranello. Every time Vasseur stays silent, Stella is forced to talk. And in this sport, the side that talks more is usually the one on the defensive. Insiders report that McLaren's communications team has been instructed to de-escalate the narrative, but it's too late. The narrative has a life of its own now. Meanwhile, the drivers' union, that quiet fraternity of competitors, has taken notice. Hamilton, Norris, Verstappen, even Alonso, they've all seen how cleanly Piastri played the game. No theatrics, no leaks, no rebellion. Just a few perfectly timed sentences that shifted the power structure of two of the biggest teams in the world. It's a masterclass in political precision. Piastri has learned from the best, from Mark Webber's sharp management, from Fernando Alonso's mind games, from Hamilton's calm control. He's learned that in Formula One, you don't fight with speed alone, you fight with silence, timing, and leverage. And then, just when the noise seemed to settle, Ferrari's own communication team made the story explode again. They posted a photograph of the Maranello simulator late one evening with a single caption: "Preparing for the future." No names. No tags. But the number on the digital dash was clear: 81. Piastri's old Formula 2 number. Within minutes, social media erupted. Coincidence or signal? No one could say. But by morning, the entire paddock was convinced something is happening behind the scenes, and Austin would be the epicenter.